There's a soil in the Amazon basin that scientists still cannot fully explain. It sits in dark patches across the rainforest floor, sometimes several feet deep. The forest around it is famously poor, thin, acidic, exhausted after a single season of farming. But these dark patches stay fertile for centuries, and in some places they appear to renew themselves. Local farmers dig it up and sell it by the sack, and it keeps producing. The people who made it vanished more than 500 years ago, and they left no written instructions. For a long time, nobody even believed a human hand had built it. The soil has a name that the people who found it gave it in Portuguese. They called it Terra Preta, which simply means black earth. And buried inside almost every sample of it, there is one ingredient doing most of the work. Charred wood, not ash, not burned scraps, but wood cooked slowly with very little oxygen until it turns to a black, porous carbon. Today we call that material biochar, and the story of how it was rediscovered is stranger than most people realize. This is not a method that was hidden from you by some villain. It is a method that the modern world simply forgot and only started remembering a few decades ago. So, before we go further, let me be honest with you about what this soil can and cannot do. You will hear people online call Terra Preta infinite soil, a soil that lasts forever and never runs out. That is not true, and you deserve the real number instead of a fairy tale. What the research actually shows is more impressive than infinity, because it is real. Studies on biochar in soil show a mean carbon residence time of more than 1,000 years. Terra Preta soils in the Amazon have stayed fertile for somewhere between 500 and 2,500 years. Not forever, but longer than most nations have existed. That is the honest claim, and it is the one I'm going to defend for the rest of this video. So let us start with the question that matters most to you as a gardener. Why does ordinary soil wear out, and why does this black earth not? When you add compost or manure to your garden, you are adding food for microbes. The microbes eat it, they multiply, they release nutrients, and your plants grow. But that same compost breaks down completely, usually within a single season. The carbon in it returns to the air as carbon dioxide, and the soil goes hungry again. This is why you have to keep buying more, year after year, load after load. Biochar behaves in a completely different way, and this is the whole secret. When wood is cooked slowly without much oxygen in a process called pyrolysis, its structure changes at a level you cannot see with your eyes. The soft, living tissue burns away, and what remains is a rigid skeleton of pure carbon. That skeleton is full of tiny holes, millions of them in every single piece. Researchers measured the internal surface area of wood biochar and found something almost unbelievable. 1 single gram of it can contain roughly 9,000 square feet of internal surface. That is a piece the size of your thumbnail holding a surface area larger than most family homes. And that vast hidden surface is what changes everything about your soil. Think of ordinary soil like a smooth kitchen table. When you pour water and nutrients onto it, most of them run straight off or drain away below the roots. Now, think of biochar like a dry sponge with millions of tiny rooms inside it. When water and nutrients reach it, they get pulled into those rooms and held there. The nutrients stop leaching away with every rain, and they stay parked exactly where roots can reach them. This is why researchers consistently find that biochar reduces nutrient leaching in the soil. You can water less, feed less, and still keep more of what you give your plants. But water and nutrients are only half of the story, and honestly the smaller half because the bigger story is life. Those millions of tiny rooms inside each piece of biochar are not just storage, they are shelter. Soil is not dead dirt, it is a living city of bacteria, fungi, and microscopic creatures. Under a normal garden, those microbes are exposed, washed away by rain, dried out by sun, eaten by predators. Inside the pores of biochar, they are protected, and they move in like tenants into an apartment building. Studies describe this vast internal structure as habitat for beneficial microbes, and that is exactly what it becomes. One study on co-composted biochar found a complex nutrient-rich organic coating forming on the inner and outer surfaces of the particles. In plain language, the biochar became coated in a living, feeding layer that slowly releases nutrients to plants over time. This is the mechanism behind Terra Preta, and it is not one magic ingredient. It is a stable carbon skeleton that shelters life and holds water and food for centuries, while that life does the growing. Now, before I show you how to make this in your own garden, I need to stop and be direct with you. Everything I have shown you so far is the mechanism, the why behind Terra Preta. The complete step-by-step protocol I have put together lives in a companion guide called the Sovereign Garden Code. There are 3 things in that guide that I deliberately did not put in this video, and I want to name them clearly so you know exactly what is inside and what is not. The first is the exact charging protocol, the precise method for preloading fresh biochar with nutrients and living microbes before it ever touches your soil. This step matters enormously because raw, uncharged biochar can actually steal nutrients from your plants in the first season instead of feeding them. The second is the layering ratio and depth chart, the exact proportion of biochar to compost to soil, and how deep to build each layer for your specific garden bed. The third is the 30-day activation sequence, the day-by-day schedule that takes a fresh bed from construction to a living, self-feeding system. Those three things, the charging protocol, the layering ratio and depth chart, and the 30-day activation sequence, are genuinely not in this video. They are in the guide, and the first link in the description takes you to it for less than the price of a single bag of premium potting soil. That is the honest offer. No fake timer, no fake scarcity, just the full protocol if you want it. And there is a 90-day money-back guarantee, so if it does not work for your garden, you get your money back and you keep every bonus. Members report strong results, and individual results will always vary with your soil, your climate, and your effort. Okay, back to the soil, because you can absolutely start with what I am about to show you next. Because the beautiful thing about biochar is that the raw material is often free. Fallen branches, prunings, old untreated wood, garden waste that you would otherwise throw away. You never want to make biochar from treated lumber, painted wood, or anything contaminated, because those poisons stay in the char and go straight into your food. Clean wood only, and the cleaner the source, the better the result. The oldest home method is simply to dig a cone-shaped pit and burn clean wood in it from the top down. As the top layer burns, it starves the wood beneath it of oxygen, and instead of turning to ash, that lower wood turns to char. You watch for the moment the flames turn from thick smoke to a clean shimmer, and then you stop the burn with water or a layer of soil. What you are left with is not ash, but black, brittle, glassy carbon that snaps in your hand. That snap is how you know you have real biochar and not just burned wood. Now here is the single most important warning in this entire video. Do not put fresh biochar straight into your garden and expect miracles. Fresh biochar is like a dry sponge with millions of empty rooms, and those rooms are hungry. If you bury it raw, it will pull nutrients out of your soil to fill itself, and your plants can actually suffer in that first season. This is the mistake that makes people say biochar did not work for them. The ancient soils were never made from raw char alone, so remember the research on Terra, Preta itself. Scientists found it was a combination of charred material together with nutrient-rich household waste, kitchen scraps, bones, ash, and manure. The char was always charged first, soaked and mixed with living, nutrient-rich material until every one of those tiny rooms was full. That is why the charging protocol I mentioned is so important, and why raw application is the #1 reason gardeners fail with this method. So even at the simplest home level, you mix your crushed char into a compost pile or a bucket of diluted manure and let it sit and soak before it ever meets your beds. Charged biochar, worked into your soil, becomes a permanent structure. Compost feeds your garden for a season, but charged biochar builds the house that holds the food for decades. And this is the difference between gardening that depends on constant buying and gardening that slowly becomes self-sustaining. Every year you add a little more, and every year your soil holds more water, more life, and more food on its own. This is not a trick, and it is not a shortcut. It is the slow, patient method that built the most fertile soil on Earth, and it still works in a backyard today. The people who made Terra Preta are gone, but the soil they built is still feeding people right now. That is the real lesson here, and it is bigger than any single growing season. You are not just feeding plants. You are building something that outlasts you. If you want the exact charging protocol, the layering ratio and depth chart, and the 30-day activation sequence, they are waiting for you in the first link below. This knowledge does not belong to the companies that want you buying fertilizer forever. It belongs to the gardeners who decided to build soil that lasts. Subscribe to this channel so this knowledge does not get forgotten again.